You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, Principal Matters friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the school leaders podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership, along with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke. Dr. Jen Schwanke, wow, this is May, which means for some schools, it's Maycember, which my wife Missy calls, because it's the busiest, craziest month of the year next to December. For some other principals, their June is going to be like that, depending on when they wrap up school. But man, we're getting so close to the end as we wrap up. And do you have a senior this year? I'm trying to remember where you are.
I do. I have a senior. Yes, he'll be graduating and going off to college. And so, yeah, we have a fun-packed May. And then we're going to go on a big trip to celebrate that graduation, which is, we're blaming it on his graduation, but it's really just a trip we all wanted to take.
Yay. Oh, I love that so much. And those senior memories are so wonderful. Something else that is on my mind as we step into this week is, as my new book has come out, I've been asked to be a guest on 6 different podcasts, which has just been so much fun. So if you don't follow us on social media, both Jen and I, we post pretty regularly on Twitter or Instagram, or I still call it Twitter, X, and LinkedIn. So check out those posts, and you can see a lot of our other friends that are asking us as we get invited onto podcasts. But Jen, I just wanted to take a few minutes today with my new book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love. I have a chapter called Curiosity plus Inquiry equals Discovery. And one of the reasons I wrote this chapter was because I just think it's so important when we are in the journey of leadership that we circle back to what made us love classrooms in the first place, what makes us love schools in the first place. Because I'm so convinced that those same things that make us love a good classroom or make us just love being in a school are the same things that keep us fresh in the journey of leadership. And so there's a wonderful story that I think I brought to the podcast in the past of a young couple named John and Molly Chester, who started a small farm out in California. And they didn't hire, but they reached out to, and he volunteered to come in. They brought in an older farmer to mentor them on a regular basis, and his name was Alan York. And as they were trying to figure out how to build a sustainable farm by adding new crops and vegetation and farm animals, they wanted to move away from kind of the contemporary farming model to the more of the traditional one that had all that variety. And I watched this in a documentary, and there was this one part that Alan York says that I went back and watched this documentary like 3 times because I was like, wow, there's something here I want to hold on to. And it was a part in the story where he was explaining to John and Molly that the more complexity that you create in this farm, eventually over time, the more sustainable it will become. But he said something that really stood out to me. He said that the more complexity that you create, the simpler farming will become for you, but it will never be easy. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, oh, that's so much wisdom in that. And so I just wanted to just pause here with you today, because when you think back to your own journey in leadership, what are some ways that those complexities have made more sense over time, or what are some ways that curiosity has kept that journey fresh for you?
Well, I love that idea of acknowledging that just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. That can be applied to pretty much every professional step I've ever taken. I think one of the things that all educators do is make things very complicated in our own minds. Everything's complicated. Everything's an emergency. Everything feels like it has dire consequences. And a lot of it actually doesn't. And so I think it's very helpful to try to simplify our decision making. Again, that doesn't mean make it easier or take a shortcut or cut corners. It means try to simplify the way that your brain is swirling around. And again, this can apply to decisions that you make about your school or decisions you make about yourself and what you're going to do with yourself. So my challenge is to embrace that complexity, but try to boil it down to its simplest components. And we referred to this last week a little bit when we were talking about making options and when we were talking about doors opening. And
Yeah.
I think, you even say in the book, building broader perspective helps you with your decision making. And
Mhm.
you point out that, being curious leads to inquiry, which will lead to discovery. That's where your epiphany comes, where you
Yeah.
think, oh, well, that's what I should do. Right. So it does kind of boil that complexity into simpler parts.
Well, and you've been really helpful in you've been helpful in motivating me to see, because you brought this up in other conversations, Jen, that sometimes when we're in the middle of something that's confusing or difficult, we need to take a step back from it and ask, is this a people problem or a process problem?
Right.
You know,
Right.
because maybe the system I'm using or maybe the processes that I'm using, if they're creating the same results over and over again, then it's very possible I need to change the process
Right.
or the system. And that level of curiosity, which is like, okay, let's take a step back and let's just study this as a system. I think that can be applied in so many ways
Hmm.
that can be super helpful. I'll take you back when I was transitioning from teacher to admin. I was working on my master's in administration. I was teaching AP language at the time and high school language arts. And I don't know why I did this, but I remember maybe it was because I was taking a class like on human capital or something, but I remember being really curious, what goes on in the central office? So one day on my planning period, I didn't even ask permission. This is Will, Will doesn't ask permission. I just wandered down to the central office complex and I walked in and said, "Hey, is it okay if I ask a few questions?" And they're like, "Sure. Who do you want to see?" And I was like, "Can I talk to somebody in payroll?" And they're like, "Okay." So I walked down to payroll and I'm like, "How do you do payroll?" Because I get this check every month and they're like, "Well, is there a problem? Did you have miscalculate?" And I was like, "No, I'm just curious." So it was so wonderful. She pulled out her books and just started showing me, well, this is how I do payroll and this is when it comes in and this is the challenges that I have. And I was just sitting there being curious, Jen, because I was
She
like,
was she was probably so nice to you because she assumed you were there to yell at her about something, some mistake. And when she realized you weren't, she's like, "Have a seat. I'll show you everything."
yeah, but there's probably something that you are curious about, or maybe you're going to be managing someday, or maybe someone will be asking you to participate in decisions about. And so here's some questions that I put in this chapter that might be helpful for somebody. Like, who might you know, or who could you find through a search online that might find that might know more about an area that you are curious about? Are there available articles or books that would give you more insights into understanding whatever that thing is you're curious about? If you're looking at a new position, what are the salary ranges or potential incomes that already exist that you could be aware of so that you're not going in clueless? What additional training or educations or certifications might you need to consider if you want to learn more? Is there someone or someplace you could visit to find out more about something you're curious about? And then here's the really practical part. Where on your calendar are you going to place time? Once a week or once a month or twice a month to pursue your curiosities? Because, man, I tell you what happens, Jen, when you give yourself permission to be curious, you're going to discover something. And when
Right.
you discover something, it's going to lead to probably a new action. So there's this really beautiful part in that documentary, The Biggest Little Farm, where the Chesters had been farming. They had had a mentor, but they kept running into some things on the farm they couldn't find the answers to through Google or even through
Right.
their mentor. And so John Chester told this story that I held on to as a leader, where he said what he started finding himself doing when he ran up against the things that he didn't know how to solve, he would just go take a walk on his farm. And as he walked the places where he was struggling or had questions about and just looked and observed nature or the way animals behaved or the way that the plants responded to his care or pests or whatever, usually it was by walking the farm that he came up with ideas that he'd never had before. And so anyway, as we wrap up this conversation, I just want to invite people to curiosity because I think it's a wonderful way to keep learning.
Right, exactly. And by the way, this we could title this podcast Take a Walk because there's actually a lot of research about that,
Hmm.
about how if you just get your body moving and your mind away from that area where you're making it too complex. You're stirring, you're whirling, you're stirring things up that don't exist. Get out, take a walk, think clearly, come back, try it again.
So Principal Matters listeners, as we're wrapping up this conversation about whose permission are you waiting for, you're wrapping up a really important part of your year. And so give yourself permission to enjoy it. Give yourself permission to endure it. But give yourself permission too, as you're planning out your summer and those times when you're going to finally have some space, to just stay curious, to explore those things that are going to keep bringing you joy in this work that you're doing. So Jen, thank you for the opportunity to pull together again. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.